your name. I don't have your titles, I don't have your land, but if you gave me command of a battalion, a group of men to lead, I could fly above my station after the war.
Or you could die, and we need you alive.
I'm more than willing to die.
Your wife needs you alive. Son, I need you alive.
Call me son one more time!
So today I want to talk about this famous argument that happened between George Washington and Alexander Hamilton in the winter of 1781. It is described by biographer James Flexner as the crack-up in his book The Young Hamilton, which I'm getting a lot of this information from. So if you've seen the musical Hamilton, you're probably familiar with the song Meet Me Inside, which captures a lot of sort of the elements of this argument. However, that song kind of combines a number of different occurrences into one song, but I'm just going to address one of them, which was this argument between Washington and Hamilton. The argument begins in February of 1781. It's a pretty average day at Washington's headquarters. He's there with his staff, among them his loyal aide-de-camp, Alexander Hamilton. Well, Hamilton is coming down the stairs when he runs into Washington going up. Washington asks him if he has a moment to speak. He says that he needs to talk to him about something important. Hamilton says, of course, I'll be with you as soon as I can. I just have to run downstairs and do something really quick. Hamilton goes downstairs. He hands this letter off to Colonel Tillman, one of the other aides, asking him to mail it for him. And then he goes to meet with Washington, but he's stopped by his dear friend, the Marquis de Lafayette. Well, Lafayette and him are talking for some time. According to Hamilton, in his later attempts to defend himself, he says that they were only talking for half a minute. That's what he says in his first account of this argument. Then in a later account, he says, okay, well, maybe we were talking for a minute. Chances are it was probably a bit longer. He's talking to Lafayette. He does eventually remember he had told Washington he would go and speak with him, so he excuses himself and he goes upstairs. Well, he gets upstairs and he is greeted by a very cross George Washington. Colonel Hamilton, you have left me waiting at the head of these stairs for 10 minutes. I say, sir, you show me much disrespect. Well, Hamilton, he's not in the mood for this. Nope, he is in the mood for a fight. I don't know what you were talking about. I came as quickly as I could. I was talking to Lafayette about important matters, and you know what, George? If you're gonna yell at me like this for some stupid little thing, I think I'm done. I'm gonna quit my job, okay? I'm done working as your aide. Well, if you think that would be best, then go right ahead. I don't need you. See if I care. Quit. Hamilton storms down the stairs, immediately goes to Lafayette, and just starts venting all his troubles. Oh my God, George is being the worst. He yelled at me for like no reason, and I'm just so fed up with his grumpiness and just all of his stuff. I told him finally that I quit. I'm done working for him. Whoa there, pal. Slow down. There's someone outside looking at me like I'm fucking crazy because I'm literally sitting here having a conversation with myself and like switching. I'm just waiting for them to pass. Okay, they're gone now. I usually try and do this early on Saturday mornings because there's not many people in the library, but I guess there is this morning. Okay, whoa there, pal. Calm down. I know you're mad. George is being a bit grumpy, but you don't want to quit your job. And we don't want you to quit your job. We need you, so just take some deep breaths. Hamilton is not taking any deep breaths. He's not calming down. He's not changing his mind. Bro, I'm serious. I'm done. I've been waiting for the opportunity to just get out of here, and this is it. I'm not taking back what I said. So Lafayette goes to Washington and talks to him and tries to have him calm down a bit, and Washington unlike Hamilton, is able to sort of collect himself and realize that maybe he was a bit unreasonable. So he attempts to reconcile with Hamilton. But one of my favorite elements of this story is that the two of them, even though they're in the same building, just on separate floors in their respective offices, they refuse to talk to each other face to face. They insist on communicating through messengers. So Washington sends Tench Tillman to speak on his behalf. Hey, Hamilton. So George told me to tell you that he's sorry and he was a bit grumpy and unreasonable and he doesn't want you to quit and you don't want to quit, of course. So you should go talk to him so you guys can work this out. Well, you can tell George that I said that I don't want to talk to him because I have made up my mind. I'm not coming back. I'm quitting my job, and nothing he can say will change that. So there's really no point in us talking. But I would not be so disrespectful as to refuse to meet with him. However, tell him I would appreciate it if he would permit me to decline the offer. Yeah, tell him that. That's one thing that cracks me up, the way Hamilton there just is like so awkwardly going about this in his words and like, well, I don't want to talk to him, but he thinks I'm so disrespectful. I'm not gonna, justify that by completely refusing to talk to him. But tell him I want him to permit me to decline this invitation to talk to him. That sounds more polite. So Tench Tillman takes the message back to Washington, and that's that. Washington doesn't make any further attempt to reconcile with him, and it's decided that Hamilton will leave his staff. However, Hamilton is not a monster. He agrees to stay for a couple more weeks while they make arrangements for someone else to take over his responsibilities. So, a couple hours later, they have to interact with each other again and act like nothing happens. There's also sort of this agreement between them that they're not going to say anything about this argument, that they're going to sort of make up another excuse for why Hamilton's leaving and kind of keep it on the down low. Well, Washington honors that promise, but Hamilton does not. Hamilton, almost immediately after this, starts drafting a lengthy letter to his father-in-law, Philip Schuyler, which is where we get most of the details of this argument. And Hamilton is just going on and on, justifying himself and about how Washington is so unreasonable and he had every right to do this. He also really is like talking trash about Washington, even though his father-in-law, Philip Schuyler, was a strong supporter of Washington's. George Washington, he wants to be like my friend. Like he has this whole thing where he like treats all his aides like his sons or whatever, but like I never liked him that much. He always tried to be my friend, but I never like reciprocated that. I was always strictly professional because personally, I think he's kind of annoying. Like I don't see why everyone worships him so much. I mean, God, he's like really arrogant and annoying, okay? I don't see why you worship him so much, Philip Schuyler. Like, God. Whoa, wait a second. Leave me out of this. So he's talking all this trash about George Washington, which George Washington a few months later actually ends up hearing about. It's like, Hamilton, what the hell? I thought we weren't going to talk about this. So Hamilton was so kind of immature and gossipy, and it cracks me up because I feel like, have a tendency to sometimes assume that back then people were just more mature or formal or something, but no. People have always been petty and immature and stupid, as this argument very well illustrates. Hamilton goes back to Albany to stay with his father-in-law, and he brings, of course, his wife, Betsy, and things are kind of quiet for a time. His wife is so happy to have him home. Maybe finally we can just have a quiet domestic life here in Albany. Maybe my husband will finally, stick around and not constantly be away dealing with this war. This is wonderful. Hamilton's not on the same page, and he very quickly gets bored. One of the things he does in this time is he does a lot of writing, unsurprisingly. He, in particular, starts writing these letters to a man named Robert Morris, who has been appointed by the Continental Congress to this new position of Superintendent of Finance. So he's basically, this position is an early form of the office that Hamilton would, of course, go on to hold, the Secretary of Treasury. So Hamilton starts writing this guy these letters about all these ideas that he has. He starts talking about his ideas of how they should incur this national debt, his ideas about creating a national bank, and this superintendent guy, Robert Morris, is just kind of like, who is this like 20-year-old kid who keeps sending me these letters, and like, why is he telling me how to do my job? And so it's just kind of some foreshadowing there of Hamilton already at this point is showing an interest in that aspect of government. In July of 1781, Hamilton's been home for a couple months now, and he's starting to get bored. And he gets word that Washington's troops, as well as some of their French allies, are camped along the east shore of the Hudson River. So he goes down to see them. He doesn't go right to Washington. They have got their whole weird argument thing still going on. But he goes to some of Washington's aides, who he knew because they had worked together. And he starts asking them, so like, have you guys heard George mention anything about giving me a actual field command? I don't know, just, the aides basically respond to say like, no, he hasn't said anything about that. So this is one of the big reasons that Hamilton followed through with his threat to leave Washington's staff. He, for years, had been longing to get out of this aide position where he spent most of his time behind a desk and get out in the field and actually fight the war, because he wanted the excitement and the glory of being on the battlefield. So he was hoping that if he quit Washington's staff and just made it very clear that he was done working that sort of position, that Washington, who had a soft spot for Hamilton, would eventually appoint him to a field command. But he shows no signs of doing this. So Hamilton, upon receiving this news from Washington's aides, writes a very strongly worded letter to Washington, and he encloses his commission in the Continental Army. This letter actually does not survive today. Most of these sort of correspondences of George Washington's have been very well preserved, but this one cannot be found, and it's most likely because it was so angry and upsetting to George Washington that he destroyed it. Basically, what Hamilton's doing here is he's saying, you know what? If George isn't going to give me a command, I guess I have to take it a step further and forget quitting his staff. I'll just quit the army. I'm done with this. I'm being disrespected. Maybe this will send a message to him. I'm just quitting the whole army. I'm going to go back to Albany and I'll find something else to do. Well, Washington gets this letter, and some of his close friends and fellow officers, such as Nathaniel Greene and Marquis de Lafayette, they all sort of are telling him, he has a point. He may be a kind of annoying in the way he's going about it, but you really should give Hamilton a field position if he's not going to work as your aide. But he's so good as an aide. And he's kind of small and frail. I don't think he'll actually be that good in the field, but he's killer behind a desk. But he's not he's refusing to work as an aide, so may as well put him to some use. So Washington again sends Colonel Tillman as sort of his messenger to Hamilton. He returns Hamilton's commission, which he had sent Washington as sort of this gesture of his resignation, and basically says like, Hamilton, chill out, okay? Don't quit the army. Calm down, and George will see what he can find for you to do. Yes, that's how you get stuff done. A couple weeks later, in late July of 1781, Washington appoints Hamilton to command this small battalion of New York troops. And it's great. This is exactly what Hamilton wanted. So a couple months pass, and they're moving towards the famous decisive battle at Yorktown. And there's this one assignment at Yorktown that Hamilton has his eye on. There's this assault on these two British fortifications, redoubts 9 and 10, which will be very important to their victory in this fight. And whoever leads this mission and accomplishes this capture will inevitably get some praise and be seen as very heroic. This is it. This is the assignment I want. This is my chance for like my moment of glory. Washington appoints Lafayette to lead the assault on 9, redoubt 9, and leaves Lafayette to appoint who he would like to lead the assault on 10. Lafayette appoints another French officer who he's very close with, a man named Jean-Joseph Surbader Gimard. I apologize to the entire French language because I probably butchered that pronunciation. But he appoints this French officer, and Hamilton is pissed. What the hell? Like, what? We're bros. Come on, man. I thought we were pals. You're playing some French dude? God. This is my moment. This is supposed to be my chance to shine. You know what? I've got an idea. So Hamilton goes to Washington like a child whining to his parent. George, Lafayette won't let me help him attack Redoubt 10. He's letting his French friends do it instead, and he's leaving me out, and it hurts my feelings. Tell him he has to let me help them attack the British. Washington, surprisingly, with all this sort of drama that's gone on between him and Hamilton in the last couple weeks, he actually still does just sort of have this strange soft spot for him. So he sides with Hamilton and he orders Lafayette to reassign that command to Hamilton. And so Hamilton gets his dream position in this mission at the Battle of Yorktown and finally gets his exciting time in the field. To draw it back sort of to the song for the musical, that song really combines sort of two separate occurrences. The first one being the duel between Charles Lee and John Laurens, in which Hamilton served as Laurens' second. That was a real event that did happen. However, it actually happened in, I think, December of 78, whereas this other argument I've been describing began around February of 81. So there was actually a large span of time that passed between those, and it really wasn't the primary reason that Hamilton left Washington's staff. And in fact, when he left Washington's staff, unlike the song sort of implies, it was actually his choice and at his insistence. Washington, as I described, tried to get him to stay. But nevertheless, I love that song and that musical, so no disrespect there. So that's this week's story, just an example of how these noble historic figures that we look up to and revere, the founding fathers, they could be just as petty and bitter and argumentative as your average middle school girls. So, humans never really change. Thanks for watching. As always, like and subscribe for more videos about weird, fun, random history stories. And I'll see you guys next week. My next video, I think will focus on the 1876 plot to hold the corpse of Abraham Lincoln as a hostage. So, the story told in the book Stealing Lincoln's Body. I'll have more on that later.
The Battle of Yorktown, 1781.
Monsieur Hamilton,
Monsieur Lafayette,
in command where you belong.
are you saying no sweat? We're finally on the field, we've had quite a run.
Immigrants, we get the job done.
So what happens if we win?
I go back to France, I bring freedom to my people if I am given the chance.
We'll be with you when you do.
Go, lead your man.
I'll see you on the other side.
Till we meet again.
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my